Welcome everyone to episode 4 of the Krause House podcast. I'm off site today. I'm across the old pond.
Flexington Chapsonsworth the third.
Hello, mate.
Hey, there it is.
Take the free shot. Oh, the tube. You got to put a C in there. The tube. I apologize to all the English listeners, all the Krause House folks.
They've signed off.
Yeah, accents are not our forte. We're good at other things, debatable, but we got a good one today. Dude, before we even start, I think the ownership acquisition space continues to be on fire. We have more news there. Again, more things about differentiating in leagues, a lot of fun things about new leagues popping up, news about new leagues, continuing with our thesis of disintermediating sports with these kind of new and innovative leagues. So it's a good one today, absolutely. And we're gonna have a little fun at the end with horrible drip. And I know you know all about horrible drip. So that's gonna be, that's going to be a good one.
Literally look in your webcam, bro.
Relax, dude. Relax. You're the one that forgot your gear. I don't know how much I buy that. So you're not going to get roasted like you did last time with the GTA lobby. And I got a couple DMs, but you look good. I like the
couple
mask, so
DMs.
Just make sure you don't forget it next time.
That is meant to be the drip. Yeah, let's kick it off. So Qatar Health Fund bought into the Wizards parent for about $4 billion. Monumental Sports is the name of the organization. So that's Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund. It's interesting because they bought into this parent organization that's called Monumental Sports and Entertainment. And I think it's a really interesting structure that we should just touch on what Monumental essentially is. So they own the Washington Wizards. Shout out to Flex. The Washington Capitals, the Washington Mystics, Capital City Go-Go. I'm not entirely sure what that is. They have 3 esports teams. They also have real estate. So they have the Capital One Arena, which I believe that's where the Wizards play, and then some of the other smaller arenas in the area. They also have media. So Sports Washington, that's actually, maybe you can comment, that's like the big NBC local like sports broadcasting channel.
Yeah, exactly. And don't disrespect Go-Go music. So our G League team is named after a style of music that was born in DC. So they are the Washington Go-Go. So that is their G League team. But yes, that's the local network as well.
And then it looks like a foundation, a nonprofit. So this Monumental sort of conglomerate owns the actual sports club asset, the esports, like this, the digital representation of that real world sports asset, where they actually then play the game, and then how and where you watch it. And then that is this kind of conglomerate entity, which I think we should talk a little bit about that actual structure. I think that's a structure pattern that we're starting to see becoming more and more common as these valuations increase, as opposed to a single siloed asset. But so Qatar Investment, they put in about 5% stake into this Monumental Sports. So again, this is like that top level group that has an ownership and positions in the entities beneath that. This also puts the valuation of Monumental as a whole at $4 billion, which I actually thought was an interesting number. Like, it seems actually a little low to think that you could get a piece of the Capitals and the Wizards for $4 billion, let alone an arena, which I know aren't particularly profitable, but then a media company. Like, just a little surprised at that valuation. But it might also be, there might not be a lot of control or governance over the asset as well. So maybe there might be some discounts baked in there. It's worth noting, though, this investment fund as one of the 10 largest sovereign wealth funds in the world. They have over $450 billion under management. They're not going to have any board seats, any voting power, which is another pattern we're tending to see with this, which is silent LP money going into these organizations. Monumental has kind of stated they look at this as an investment to help fuel their growth, as well as building out some of their existing and future acquisitions. It's worth noting, we've talked about this in the past, but in 2020, the NBA was the first major US league to start opening up to private equity, and then recently expanding to endowments, family offices, and now sovereign wealth funds, this is an example of one of the very first situations of it. There's definitely been some controversy, which we'll touch on in a minute, around especially this like human rights concerns, kind of sports washing accusations, which I think is a really fascinating and nuanced conversation. But I think going into that, how do you see these kind of different real estate, media, professional sports clubs kind of dynamics impacting a business as a sort of conglomerate versus having independently siloed entities? Like, what's your assessment of that structuring?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? It does a few things. It allows for, if you're QIA, right, it allows for the obvious answer is diversification, right? It's other than particularly markets. Like, I think sports as a non-cyclical asset is just like really interesting. I don't want to call it fully recession proof, right? But it just doesn't have quite the swings as other markets do. So from that perspective, it's interesting. Obviously, the investment and profitability, as we've seen with sports over the past several years, call it decade, is on fire. So again, makes sense there. Really interesting too from a globalization and like a market penetration perspective of like getting access to something like a professional sports, or I'll even call it like a suite, like this collective asset group to like maybe do cross promotions or maybe penetrate into other markets where you typically wouldn't. That's a nice way to get in, especially now with NBA loosening their international sponsorship rules. That's the obvious direction that we're heading. Something that you alluded to, which I think is obviously a topic, is like that ethical and reputational risk. I think if you are Monumental, like making sure you choose the right partners for that, it's a very complex and complicated topic, but in general, it's really interesting, right? Because when you see these, you're talking about maybe teams, dare I say, like even started to like vertically integrate. Like you have these media, you have the you certain rights and IP, you have the stadium. That's an entire thing that you can push either promotions, marketing, other sort of IP through that vertical that could result in a lot of synergy for both sides, the team, the investment group, and even the league. I don't think it's a shock that both the NBA with the new rules for endowments and pensions and things like that are moving in that direction. And then these funds are just all over it. And so we're seeing record high valuations from a strictly business standpoint. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I really like it. I think it's interesting too that you made a comment about going vertical. And I think that's certainly something that we're seeing. And part of my mind is like thinking, what is the next level? Like adding esports in there is a great example, right? That's a lot different than some of them, but obviously really similar. But my mind started to wonder a little bit too, is like, what does it look like for if you go and buy something like The Athletic and you could cover your team a little bit more extra than all the other teams, or buy an ESPN or going into, because I'm looking at this NBC Sports Washington group, which I think they're renaming to Monumental Sports as for their broadcasting name. But we've seen a lot of these like kind of hyper local things that they're saying, okay, we cover our teams and this is what that is. It is crazy to think though, at these prices, I don't know what The Athletic, I think it recently got acquired, and I know but the valuation, I'm presuming somewhere in the hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a large thing, but a small thing compared to all this stuff. And I just think it's fascinating. What other things could you put into a holding company like this that accelerate some of that compound growth? And if I'm Monumental, again, acquiring The Athletic and moving all the Washington teams to the top, we know how powerful that is in a newsfeed algorithm or in a Twitter algorithm to just give a little bit of boost to that. I don't know. I'm just curious what other things we can start to see that kind of go in this vertical stack that also serve horizontal. I'm thinking about the Amazon.com tipping into AWS, and then AWS is happy to serve Shopify's servers. And even though they're indirect competitors, they don't give a shit. And I think that's really interesting. But of course, they can juice up their stuff. They can learn intel about it. So anyways, I'm just fascinated around this concept of what other weird things we stick in the conglomerate as these conglomerates grow and explore.
Yeah, the AWS is really interesting comparison, right? Because they're like the poster child for turning their cost center into a revenue generator, which is really interesting. So like I'd be interested from a franchise perspective, ownership group perspective, what is that cost center that you can then take investment or even take strategic investment and sell that to other teams or even to other teams in other sports. Like I think that vertically integrated style is interesting because like we're definitely at this seemingly paradigm shifting where like the sports as a business is you just can't ignore it. And like it's very lucrative. These are lifestyle brands, right? I talk about this a lot. I won't use the Wizards as an example, but something like the Lakers, right? This is a 24-hour a day thing. This is not a direct consumer brand that you like when you need an extra pair of socks or a new piece of luggage, right? These are something that you quite literally eat, sleep, and breathe. And I'm not surprised that they're tapping into more traditional businesses like media and real estate to grow their valuation. It just makes a ton of sense. Leading into the next segment, surprise, another acquisition. MLSE, the ownership group that owns the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Raptors, and Toronto FC. So Larry Tannenbaum, the chairman of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, MLSE, talks to selling 25% stake of their holding to OMERS, which is a pension plan in Ontario for municipal employees. The proposed deal values the company at $8 billion, which would make a new record for sports team sales. Primary assets include the Raptors, as mentioned, which, by the way, going through this, right, you got the 2019 champions in the Raptors. You have the Maple Leafs, which are the highest value team in the NHL. And then you have the Toronto FC, which finished fifth in the tables of MLS. And then the Canadian football Toronto Argonauts, which I'm not sure, not exactly sure where they finished. But anyway, that suite of assets is really interesting. So the sale follows the recent decision to allow investments from endowments, pension funds, and sovereign wealth, like we mentioned earlier, with expectation to be mirrored by the NHL, which you alluded to earlier. Again, very interesting, very similar to segment one. But what do you make of funds, like specifically pension funds in this case, being the largest shareholders of pro club assets? What does that mean for the leagues that they're investing in, and what does it mean for the funds?
Yeah, I think to me, the macro trend here is the NBA has opened up new capital vehicles to sit on the cap table. Every other league has essentially copied the NBA's general strategy, right? So NBA was first to do private equity. I think NHL, MLB quickly followed suit. NFL has been the main holdout. I imagine the NHL and the MLB will also allow sovereign wealth and pension funds, endowment funds to join as well. And I suspect the NFL over the next 5 to 10 years will inevitably step into this same structure as well. Assuming that's true, I mean, valuations, we think that they're going up high now. They're going to keep up going as all of this capital is flowing into it. It's certainly one of the most interesting, hottest asset classes right now. And I think suspect for the next 5 to 10 years, as people are looking at this kind of sports as a new religion trend that we've talked about. And so I think this is a macro growth bubble, bull run, however you want to describe it, but there's certainly a lot of attention thinking back into these. To contrast this though, the pension fund being in this versus the sovereign wealth fund, which at a high level doesn't particularly matter, right? It's just a bunch of capital piled in from, in both cases, a lot of people, and it represents these larger positions. But I love the idea of a pension being in more than I like a sovereign wealth fund in it. Not that I'm opposed to it, but if I had to choose one, I like the pension fund because I feel like there's this element of the workers are working, they're contributing to this union. That union is now putting it into presumably a collection of assets that those workers probably also cheer for. And so I love that sort of like positive feedback loop. But there, if you kind of squint, it's fan ownership, right? It's saying, hey, I live in Toronto. I'm part of this union. I contribute my union fees. Part of how my pension plan grows and evolves and how I get money back in that is that they're investing that in the favorite teams that I go and spend the rest of my paycheck on because I love watching. I love it. And so part of me really resonates with the pension fund piece of it because that fan ownership loop, albeit it's extractive, if you probably really dissect where all the cash flow value is exactly going in that, I just kind of like that. I like that flow. So I'm excited for pension funds to explore it. If I were in the pension fund as a person, maybe near retirement or so maybe mid-level, I'd be a little nervous. What is the return profile, risk profile? Like what if sports assets aren't recession proof? So I'd want to better understand the pensions investment strategy, but they're competent. They have $92 billion in assets under management. I'm sure this is a small slice of that, but I like it. I like the general trend of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like it a lot and pretty familiar with pension fund in my previous life. Used to work for one of the largest in the world. And you said it, right? These are typically labor unions, teachers, doctors, right? These are people that are relying for all the right reasons, may not be as financially savvy as far as long-term investing, rightfully so. And so they're counting on this money for retirement. These defined benefit funds are really interesting. They're basically guaranteeing you something when we'd like to retire and live off, steady income. So I love the diversification aspect, right? Famous last words of saying something is recession proof. Obviously it's not, but like you just don't get the typical, those like that betas are called, like you don't get the typical volatility with that. It's more of a steady increase, although it's accelerating quite a bit in these last couple of years. You have potentially high returns, right? Which is what we've seen with sports. And you have stability, right? Which we've talked about at length. I tried to pick something like, okay, I don't want to be only rose colored glasses, right? What is potentially risky? And I'm thinking like sometimes you might look at something like a liquidity risk, right? If there's another huge economic downturn, maybe something more like short term, like a financial crisis when it really hit the fan in like a very short period of time. So people decide to retire, right? So like you said, with 92 billion assets, I don't think it's a big deal, but like very less liquid than an equities market or a bonds market or something like that. I guess that's a piece of it, but in general, this is great. Interesting point around the fan ownership. We want to put an asterisk there, certainly by proxy. But this is MLSE and the pension plan is in Ontario. So it's like by proxy, they are part owners, right? So like that feedback loop to your point is really interesting. So in general, I think it's healthy. I think it's great. And this is obviously the direction that the owners want to move and are moving. The league wants to move. And obviously these private equity conglomerates, if you will, are chomping at the bit to get involved. So in general, I think it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, man. If I had to choose a red flag or sort of a pessimistic view of it, is The cash flows and the profit, the actual revenue generated by these assets and the profit that they make on these assets is not all that much money. If I recall, I'm floating this off the top of my head, but I remember us looking at the Pirates versus the Yankees as an example. And it was the Pittsburgh Pirates were making something on the order of $100 to $200 million a year in free positive cash flow. And the Yankees were losing something on that order of 100 to 200 million. And I can't recall the exact valuations of either club, but I believe the Pirates were somewhere in the billion, 1.5 billion type range. I don't know where the Yankees are, but I imagine the Yankees are 5 billion plus. And if we had to fast forward 5 years and had to look back and say, oh man, that was a terrible investment, what went wrong? That'd probably be my pick. It was like, hey, the profit earning ratio was off the charts for the valuation. And that was the red flag that at the time in 2023, when we were getting hyped, we were overlooking. But that's the only one I can really think of.
Yeah, even to play devil's advocate there, it's like that's not always an issue. Like we brought up AWS a certain time. That's the first time they ever turned profitable, but it was also by choice, right? It's like reinvesting back in the company. So it's not always different. I know sports is totally different than other public markets, but yeah, I think with the way that the valuations are going, point well taken. It's like, can these revenues and the value of them continue to increase? Because it's basically like unrealized value, right? It's brand value. It's like assuming broadcasting will go up, assuming you'll gather more fans. But as you're saying, we know quite well the revenue isn't all the way tracking with some of that other stuff, which may or may not be a bad thing. You could hit that AWS moment where all of a sudden there's a huge spike. We're believers that maybe Web3 is that ancillary revenue stream that can catch things back up, but like certainly a yellow flag. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the thing that you and I are really hyped about in kind of the Krause House zeitgeist is bringing fans deeper into the experience, accepting that there's sort of these 24/7 lifestyle brands, and the ways and opportunities to monetize that inventory is very much undertapped. Now, is the pension fund investing under that thesis? No, they might just be saying, hey, numbers going up. We like sports, invest. And so I do think as these ownership groups, and this is something we've talked about in prior podcasts, is as these valuations are jumping, this new cast of owners, and we've talked to them, are thinking about new ways of saying, okay, I just bought in for $4 billion. How do I drive this to a valuation of 12, 16, 20 billion dollars in the next 10 years? What am I doing today to drive that? And my answer better not just be, I hope the league just keeps growing. I hope, we collectively just keep finding really great, talented players to play in it. And it just turns out. And I do think as that happens and as these valuations jump, I'm not sure these larger sources of capital are thinking in that order of, hey, the game needs to improve as you buy in here. And again, we think we have some interesting ways to help deliver that. But
let me ask you this though. Is it like, I'm thinking back to the financial crisis, right? Which we're well old enough to remember quite vividly. Is there a lot of comparisons with that too big to fail mantra? Like, are the Lakers the Goldman Sachs of sports? Are the Celtics AIG, right? Is it possible for something like that to go away? You know what I mean? Like obviously you're going to hit these blips, but
if I had to accept that framing, the analysis that I would do is I would look backwards into the pipeline of talent of saying, and then to think about the game projecting into the future. So what I mean by that is saying, okay, Gen Z is even too old now at this point. I don't know. I think they're calling the new generation Gen Alpha, if I recall. But okay, in Generation Alpha, are there going to be enough talented players? Is there another LeBron sort of lurking in there? Is there interest in people playing basketball so that even if there is a LeBron in there, he chooses basketball over football or basketball over soccer or baseball? And then if he chooses us and he plays well, will Generation Alpha want to watch that, right? And then the generation after that. And so I'm looking like supply and demand 2 generations back would be how I think about it. And when I put it through that lens, I'm looking, Wemby is an example of that. I think basketball is more popular than ever. I think basketball is an excellent form of entertainment on things like TikTok, right? I think short form bursts, like amazing highlights. You can see people's faces. There's a lot of trash talk. And that's one thing I actually would criticize the NBA on is wanting to dial back the trash talk. I actually think in this new era that UFC, Conor McGregor grabbing the mic, embracing that a little bit more. I know it's not necessarily the cleanest piece of it, but I think we've watched the NFL go way too far on the taunting piece of it. Like leaning into that, I think is powerful. So I look at Generation Alpha. Do they have supply and would they have demand? And to me, I think the answer is like in spades. And when I compare them then additionally against all other sports, it's because it's a relative battle. And we've talked about also this basketball losing by kind of death by 1,000 cuts, professional cornhole and tag and all these things that have a shot in an algorithmic media driven world. I still feel like those are long tail. I feel like it's basketball. I see the NFL being dethroned. I see MLB being really squashed down. But NBA, it just feels like it's a next 2 generation, maybe 3 generation sport.
From an investment standpoint, obviously you don't want your prized possession to lose market share. But we talk about this all the time. The league that spins up that takes 1 or 2% of the NBA's market share is a very strong, viable business. But as far as a growth pattern, is that really a big deal to the NBA? And what I hear you saying, I would argue that the talent and the inflow and eyeballs is accelerating over the past couple of years than it was even in the 90s. So like, if it's on track right now, it looks like it has a really good chance of being too big to fail in that sense. I just can't see it. It's so funny because there's always this talk around tech companies, right? Can you imagine this tech company ever going away? But we've been surprised before. But it just the staying power with leagues like this is just incredible. And I think the way that media is going to your head is like these brands are turning into, they're filing to realize that they're lifestyle brands, right? Like you're going to see teams do collab with streetwear brands. You're going to see them launch vertically integrated media. You're going to see that all the time. So I think from our vantage point, the valuations are mostly justified.
One thing I'd like to throw in there, you asked me a question about the Lakers and the Celtics. Are they too big to fail? And I actually switched your question into, is the NBA going to make it? And I do think, and this is something we've also beaten the drum a lot about, is I foresee a future here where these big markets that have great weather, the new CBA just recently came out and it really hamstrings a lot of the teams that are going over the luxury tax. And I actually think that helps the great markets. I think that helps markets like LA, New York, and Miami. Like I think that the new CBA is great generally to help drive parity, but I think it's an underappreciated thing where Miami, I think just their stock rose with the new CBA. Lakers probably at the top still, New York still there. Taxes in both of those states, I think, are also getting high enough that there's some, I'd put some slight negatives on the other side, but the lifestyle at that amount of money also doesn't particularly matter. But you take like a Milwaukee as an example, and I think they, on the new CBA, they take a slide down, especially as Miami slides up. So I think one of the things too with these teams, though, are the Lakers too big to fail? Maybe not, but they're competing with the Clippers. Is it crazy to think that the Clippers are the Lakers in 20 years? Like maybe they are, and Ballmer's certainly pushing on all fronts to become that, trying to go direct with his app and whatnot to his fans. So then as I think about each team, as these new CBA deals and kind of media rights and players are thinking about free agency and whatnot, that also starts to get a little complicated too. I answered the NBA question, but I do think I look at Oklahoma City as an example. And to me, I just don't see them in Oklahoma City in the next 10 years.
You have Austin, you have Nashville, right?
Seattle, obviously.
Yeah. No, I'm talking like excluding expansion, right? Austin and
two
Nashville
teams in Chicago. Why not 2 teams in Chicago?
Exactly. Yeah, that's another good point, right? You got 2 teams in MLB. Why not the NBA?
2 teams in
So
Vegas. I mean, like a team in Mexico City, we've talked about it on the podcast, a team in London.
I'm saying expansion aside, because that's obvious. That's the worst kept secret in sports right now is that the NBA is moving to expansion. But you're right. Like teams like even Milwaukee, right? Milwaukee starts falling behind a little bit too much, or Oklahoma City, right? It's like you have these thriving cities like that are fast growing. Again, to name a few, Nashville, Austin, Raleigh's is on fire too. Yeah. Why not?
Yeah. So then I think to myself, most teams, when I think, if let's say you're like, okay, this team, Sportico might say they're worth $2 billion. Would you buy in at 3.5 or 4? Most teams, my answer almost immediately is yes. Like I think that the path that we're going on here, and this is similar to like how a venture capitalist would think, the valuation, this, that, or other thing. I think this thing is in this case, a 4x, a 5x, a 6x kind of thing. If you're able to unlock this idea of bringing fans deeper and growing the league. A team like Oklahoma, man, a team like Indianapolis is probably enough of some staying power. They have a lot of culture in basketball there, but it pulls at you a little bit. You think about it a little bit different. Would I invest in Oklahoma City at $8 billion valuation or 6? Like, no, dude. And anyways, my point that I wanted to try to touch back on here is the last 30, 40, 50 years of the NBA valuations, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Kobe, Shaq, LeBron, they've generally just taken everyone in the NBA and brought them up. And everyone's made a bag that if you've been an owner in the NBA, you've done well. I do think with these valuations, the way they're jumping, we are going to enter in a new era of competition on the business front, where it's not just going to be, hey, I own the worst team in the NBA. We pay no luxury tax. We just get by every year, and my valuation just keeps going and going because this is the best league in the world. I think that this next 10, 20 year world, they're still going to do well. I just think that the worst teams in the league, and it's not necessarily worse in terms of performance. Performance is certainly a big variable in there, but it's also just cultural, tapping into lifestyle. How deep can they go? The teams that perform really poorly in that, I think are going to have significantly worse returns than the teams that really tap into that well. So I do think we are shifting into coast mode to compete mode at the business level.
Gosh, I wish there was a competitive league where you could introduce something like promotion relegation, because that would fix a lot of those problems.
For what it's worth, that's an amazing feature for the business owners. And I don't imagine the NBA would ever touch it, but I hear you.
No, I know exactly. But I feel like they would be forced to consider it if there was another league that was close, but there's not. If you're all on the same continent, maybe. But I can't even see us doing something as a World's League with EuroLeague, because imagine the Oklahoma City Thunder having to go to Morocco to play a regular season game. Like, just wouldn't happen, right? So you're right. I don't think they would vote for it, but also even if there was incentive to do it, just wouldn't happen. Logistically, it doesn't make sense. But you're right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of coast mode. Player development coast mode with tanking, and there's also from a business side as well.
Let's move to the next topic. Fenway Sports Group buys a second team in the Tiger Woods Rory McIlroy Golf League. So this league, I don't think I think I've added it to our agenda, and I think you've removed it almost every time I've tried to do it. I love this new league, and I've been wanting to talk about it.
Time out.
Forever.
That's fully false. I like this league better than the whole PGA Live drama as a fan, right? So I'm pumped to talk about this for what it's worth.
All right. So let's talk about it. So it's a TMRW. I think that's Tomorrow Sports. It's co-founded by Tiger Woods and Rory, as well as a bunch of other golf people. Their investment list, by the way, which I saw, is amazing. Like, everyone who's in the sports world that also is just casually into golf, they want to see this thing succeed. But just to set the stage here, they're starting a league called the TGL, and I think it stands for the Golf League. And what's really interesting about it is that it's basically like an indoor golf league that's all based on simulators. And what's absolutely wild is it's like an arena, and there's crowds that can watch on the sides. You tee off and you hit facing backwards into a mat, just like you would at an indoor golf simulator. And you smash your drive. It uses cameras to get a sense of where that ball would land. You're playing a real digital course. Ball lands wherever it was. You drive the ball 300 yards in the middle of the fairway, go up to your next shot. You literally turn around. And so this kind of hard to describe. Imagine you're in an arena, you're on the edge of the arena, and you turn and face the wall right behind you. You hit your golf ball on the wall. Then it tells you where it hits. And then you turn around, and assuming, let's say you're near the green now, you then hit a real shot of a real golf ball on artificial turf onto a real green. And this green is like this big space, and it's dynamically controlled to make hills and slopes and whatever. So there's a machine underneath the green that lifts it up and down so that one side of the shot is actually high, you tap it down and it goes low. Like, the green is actually lumpy to match the real green that you're playing digitally. You hit that shot, that ball goes in the air, in the arena, and lands on that green. You then walk out and you putt in that shot. And then you play the next hole, hitting into the wall, whatever. You're shaking your head.
No, I can't believe that. I'm so excited to see,
it's amazing.
See this in action.
In some inside alpha here, I got the opportunity to talk to some of the people involved with this league. And I don't think this is confidential, so I apologize if it is to them. But one of the things they looked at was a lot of the metrics of what makes watching golf suck and what makes playing professional golf suck. And one of the things that you'll see is that the average time between shots is really long in real golf. You hit your ball 300 yards. Now you have to walk. You have to wait for everyone to hit, and then you have to walk to your 300 shot. You have to wait for that guy to hit, and then you hit your ball, and then you walk. And I forgot the time, but it was something like 2.5, 3 minutes between each shot. And so the broadcast is notoriously boring because you're waiting for all these things. And so what's really cool is, like, they have their objective is that each shot is arguably 30 seconds in between. So now you're playing a whole round of 18 in a foursome playing in this. And they have a team structure. That's what the Tiger Woods and Rory team is. And there's all the other teams. And they're playing kind of a scramble competition. There's like a long drive, all these fun different combinations that you can make. But the game itself is going to get done in about 2 hours, hour and a half, because you're hitting that ball on the mat. And then you just literally can just go and walk, the other direction. You're ready to go. And so the pace of the games can be really fast. You can make fictional worlds. There's nothing stopping you from making you hit the ball like you're on Mars and there's no gravity, right? Like, I doubt that they're going to go do that. But my point is that you can go really crazy. You're in a perfect studio, so you mic everyone up. You bring in celebrities. You have Aaron Rodgers go against Pat Mahomes. Like, I'm so excited for this league. I think these guys have nailed every single detail that I could even ask questions about, think about. I'm so excited. But Fenway bought another team in it. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me tell you why I love this so much. It's actually quite the long list. So from a spectator experience, right? You mentioned some of those things about calculating time to hit the next drive and things, but immediately you go from something that's a little bit more boring and traditional, right, for traditional golfers, and make it high energy. And I love that because, again, new leagues that form, you just can't outcompete the incumbent, particularly with sports, right? It's imagine advising a tech company that just only wants to copy and paste the biggest player in that industry. It would just fail. So almost whiplashing to the other end, I think, is your only option, and to try to slowly take market share. So from the fan experience, it's amazing. I love the fact that it's primetime broadcasts. I love that. You're in a stadium. Put it on at 7 p.m. Get more eyeballs on it. I think one of the reasons why I didn't watch golf, especially as a kid, it's on during the day, Thursday, Friday.
Thursday at 1 p.m., baby. Yeah.
So I'm at school, and then I hit the weekend, I'm out and about, and I'm like riding bikes. Like that was like, I see my dad on the couch hanging, and I'm like, this is the last thing I want to be doing right now. Right. So like, you grab those fans early, and who's to say that they can't transition to more traditional golf? But like, you're opening the doors quite a bit. It's on prime time. I love that general strategy. Probably first and foremost, the competition format. Like, I tell you this all the time. I even think I prefer to on the podcast before. It's like, I don't think I've ever watched a full round of golf as a spectator. I watched big chunks of the Masters, things like that. I'll take that back on TV. I went to the Masters in person, so I watched a ton. It was a great experience, but never watched on television a full round. Ryder Cup, I didn't miss a minute. And I like, people talk about it, but the format, teams, countries, yelling, only happens every once, completely different than the PGA. And I was so bought in, it was ridiculous. And I've watched the Ryder Cup past several times. So I love the 2-on-2 format. I love all the kind of new kind of format things that they're doing. The team element is just fantastic. The integration, I'm biased here, but the integration of technology in gameplay, I'm so for it. I think you and I may be contrarians in that across the broader fan base, but like hitting it into the simulator and then having adjustable floor, like is the only way I guess I can explain that. I just think that's awesome. And so they're going to continue to push the limits on it continuously to use technology to advance the league. They're not going to stop here. Obviously, you're going to see ways to incorporate AI. I think the reason why we've had these conversations with that group is that they're interested in Web3. So like, they're going to continue to push the boundary there, which I also think is really exciting. Again, might be in the minority there. And then the broader appeal, like take something that it was particularly watched and adored by a very small demographic and just make the whole concept more appealing. Like top to bottom, I think this is really cool. This is really exciting. Anytime Tiger Woods, right? You mentioned the investor list. Tiger Woods starting a golf league, like who wouldn't cut a check? I love everything about this.
So one of the things that's been happening, it's a really great segue, and I'll keep it short because I know we have to get to our drip section, baby, is that Tiger's been struggling with his really catastrophic injury and car crash and whatnot that he has been dealing with. And if you watch him play, one of the big things he's struggling with is walking all that distance. And people joke about golfers not being athletic. It's like Tiger Woods is a machine in terms of physically training, and he's struggling. Now, granted, he has an injury that he's dealing with in rehabbing, but he's struggling walking that far to go play the game. And I think what's really interesting about this is that you have someone like Tiger who's dealing with that. Now he can compete and play those guys shot by shot and just hit a shot, sit down, hit a shot, sit down. John Daly, go hit a shot, sit down. They can play games fast. Like, I think as we move forward in this world where we're competing in different ways, it is interesting because Tiger, as we highlighted in our last episode, made $0 in terms of tournament winnings last year.
Right.
But he was one of the top performers in that PIP fund pool. And if you take that to an extreme and say, let's just have Tiger on every week, competing in a world that he can compete in better, that's going to crush. The highlights on TikTok are going to crush him talking trash, and it's going to do well. He can
play till he's 70.
Exactly. Right. And you can bring in some of the retired greats and stuff. I'm super excited for the league. I love the team behind it. Super excited.
And this is not an isolation too, right? Like, this is a bona fide trend. This is something that is going to continue happening. I'd imagine there's going to be a few golf leagues, a few basketball leagues, a few soccer leagues. I don't know if you saw Gerard Piqué's former Barcelona footballer he launched the Kings League, I believe, 7v7, super fast pace. Every team before the game starts, they get a golden card with some sort of power up that they can use for that game. And it's randomized, right? I think it's one of 5 or 6 or something like that. Their broadcasting rights, I'm like, of course, they're aired on, you can probably guess, Twitch, YouTube, and TikTok. Of course. So it's like for all the people that are complaining that soccer may be too slow, I know it's the world's game, but like particularly in the US, soccer's too slow. I don't get it. It's like, okay, start attack some sort of vector and hear the complaints or whatever they are about the sport and then make a league around those. I just think that that's amazing. Again, our meta thesis of sports being disintermediated, you have not quite Tiger Woods level, of course, but you have a world renowned historic football player in Spain starting a new league, taking different tactics, integrating technology, and then going to where the consumer is in some of these more newer platforms to get the distribution and the broadcasting. Like, I'm obsessed with this. I'm definitely going to check this stuff out.
Let's do it. We're going to shift gears here. I'm going to actually share my screen here, Flex. Can you see my screen, sir?
Oh, wow. I do.
All right. So we're going to go through... Yeah, we're going to go through some of the most outlandish. I don't know what criteria should we do here for? Is it bad? Is it funny? Is it memorable? Or should we just commentate? Should we scroll through and comment?
Yeah, just let's go through. Scroll through one by one.
All right. Let's talk about LeBron James, number 1 overall pick, the white on white with those black, I don't know what to call those, wingtip shoes?
Yeah, they got some wingtip action going on. It's like a reverse tuxedo. This is just gross, dude. This is gross.
That's your goat, dude.
I think he needs a wide stance to keep his pants up.
To be fair, that was those pants were certainly the look. The white on white.
03, dude. I think you had a pair of those. I'm not blaming him.
I would have loved it. I don't hate this Chris Bosh look. I don't know why it's in this list here.
With the time, like the taller suits, like the longer suit jackets, that was the vibe then. So I don't know.
Don't hate it. This one's funny to me. So this is Amari, right? Yeah, that's Amari Stoudemire. I think it's just funny because he's at the bottom button. So Bosh has it unbuttoned. Yeah. He looks like there was in Star Trek, I cannot remember the Romulans, I think, had this is a Romulan vibe. But again, like it's just, he should have unbuttoned that last one.
Dude, like Amari Stoudemire wearing a tall suit jacket, dude, that thing has to be like 7 feet by itself. That's a sleeping bag right there.
Well, look, it's interesting. If you look at David Stern, so David Stern's jacket cuts off at about the same spot as Amari's, and he's got another like foot of shoulder on that, which would mean if David Stern were wearing this, it'd be down to about his knees. So it'd be like shoulders to knees. Yeah.
Dude, shout out to Amari.
So here we go. This
dude plays Red Dead Redemption once. That's all I got. That's all I got to say, man. What is going on? Who is this? Samaki Walker? Yeehaw, dude. What is up?
Dude, I love that. Oh, I was thinking Deadwood was coming to mind, but I think
Deadwood, dude. Yes, dude. That's Hardwood. So that's the new NBA spinoff.
Your boy Trae Young here.
Dude, okay, so when I saw the segment title, this is the first one I thought of. Dude, the suit shorts. Come on.
I see where he was going with it, but in hindsight, it's not great, man. There's just no point. Here's where I would make him an exception. If this were an outdoor thing, like in Mexico, like I'm imagining a beach wedding. All right, fine. But it's air conditioned. It's New York City. Like he wasn't too hot. And so there was no reason to wear shorts. I think that's
point. I don't think function was taken into account. That was not part of the deal. I think he wanted to have extravagant drip, and drip is what he got with the high waters. Those things are insane.
It's fun, by the way, seeing this little stat line about a Mavs draft Trae Young, obviously the Luka trade but just funny to see. So I did some research on here. So Jalen Rose,
look at a young Jalen here.
Now, he was routinely put in a list. I think this, especially the time period, I think this is totally fine. I see nothing wrong with this outfit.
I agree.
Nothing wrong. We got T-Mac, same deal. I don't see a problem with this. Just the era.
Yeah, the time has to be taken into consideration. It's easy to go back and look at old fashion from any era and laugh. It's the ones that don't fit in the era that I think are funnier.
This is the Tim Thomas, I think, here. There is something just funny about how thin he is and how massive the thing is and how it just hangs on him. You can tell it just hangs a little different.
Those pants.
The tailor.
Dude, talk about a beach wedding. Those linens, dude. He's got some Jinko linens on.
And the all white pin. This one to me, I think, was the worst. I'm a big Kevin Knox believer. I don't know the right word here. But dude, Fortnite inside the net. I want to see the kid succeed. I think he's got tremendous talent. He's obviously really struggled. But this is probably my most cringy one. It's just a video game. I just, man, unless he got paid a bag, which I doubt he did.
No, dude, he's got the valet driver vest on with
This
a
is rough.
Fortnite print underneath his suit jacket, dude.
It's rough. That's rough.
No, this is horrible.
This is pretty funny. Drew Gooden is Dr. Evil's doing that.
He's got the Dr. Evil. He's got the Dr. Evil. Dude, oh my God. I just want to see one of these.
So this one here, Hollis Jefferson, he was wearing
Dude,
some
the
red.
flannels.
I don't hate this one. I think it was bold. I don't hate it. It's certainly not great, but I don't know. I don't think it's that. If he were on NFL, Fox, or I don't know, I could see Shaq or something. Like, I don't know. I don't have a big problem with this one. Where are you at on this?
Yeah, I don't love it. It's nothing like it's nothing just like god awful about it. But compared to the other ones that was with the times, I feel like no, it's thumbs down for me.
Yeah. I want to see. I know we have to hop on to.
Wait, so
I think
there was one that didn't make that cut that immediately jumped to mind too. Is I think there's also some social aspect to this too, which was Bol the spider. Do you remember that? He had the bedazzled spider web on his suit, and he went to the green room but slipped till second round. So like everyone else was drafted, and they kept panning to him. And I'm a huge Bobo guy, and then shout out to obviously his pops, a old Washington Bullets guy. I was high on him. I think he's great. He had the suit with the spider bedazzle, and they just kept showing him in the green room by himself. So he had an outlandish shoot, and to throw salt on the wound, they just kept showing it, and he's sad. Oh, dude, it was bad. What are we looking at here?
I do love this Hakeem one, looking at different cameras. But like, you got the prom outfit on. Like, this photo.
Hey, you know why I don't hate that is because the Dream had one goal to get buckets. Like,
oh, dude,
he's not emceeing the Tonight Show. He has to go get buckets. So I don't hate that. In fact, I love it, dude. I don't know what camera to look at. I just got drafted. Leave me alone.
And I have one final one for you. I think you're gonna love this one. This one popped up as being bad drip. I was like, dude, this is actually one of the best
dude, I love
draft pictures I've ever seen, dude.
Dude, LJ Grandmama, he's got a Miami Vice thing. Why not? He went straight. I don't know where the draft was because it wasn't always in Brooklyn, obviously.
Right.
That man went straight to after he shook David Stern's hand, he went straight to the club. He did.
I think if you wore this now, you would get praise as being fashionable. Like, I think this look is very much
Drip Hamilton right there.
Yeah. So shout out to Larry Johnson for being, I guess, at 30 years ahead of his time.
Wow. Wow. No, good segment. Good segment. All right, guys. Thanks so much for checking it out. As always, comment. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you have any ideas. But until then, we are out.